The morning on Capitol Hill was anything but ordinary. The hearing room brimmed with an array of politicians, staffers, reporters, and cameras perched like vigilant hawks in the rafters. The atmosphere crackled with an unusual energy, the sort that heralds not a tempest but a moment of truth, as C-SPAN aired the event in real time. Yet, even those long-established networks that had dedicated years to disparaging Elon Musk found themselves compelled to pay attention. The mere mention captivated them. Musk, more than a billionaire, more than a tech mogul, is the man who has unlocked Twitter's vault and revealed the decay lurking beneath the surface. And today he was absent from the witness stand. He arrived with the intent to challenge Schumer, having summoned this hearing under the impression that he would gain the advantage, convinced he could corner Musk regarding platform accountability and the fight against misinformation. What he was unaware of was that Musk arrived not with justifications but with proof and a USB drive. It was carefully placed in the front pocket of his jacket, unpretentious, unembellished, merely facts, data, emails, timestamped, orders revealed, conference call recordings, documentation that remained steadfast, that required no interpretation. Truth in its unrefined digital essence. Musk stepped into the chamber with the air of someone who was already aware of the conclusion. Calm and composed, his expression remained inscrutable yet keenly perceptive, the sort of gaze that could dissect stories with precision as delicate as a scalpel through silk, while senators exchanged hushed words as he settled into his seat. Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, attempted to keep the familiar smirk that frequently graced his face, the expression of someone accustomed to steering results. Yet, there was an unsettling quality to Musk's composure that caused even the Democrats to feel a sense of discomfort. The gavel struck, and this session is now in session. Musk stepped up, meticulously adjusting the microphone, devoid of notes or a prepared speech, enveloped in a silence that could make even the most composed sweat, and then he began to speak. I didn't arrive with the intention of responding to inquiries. My purpose here is to pose them. He shifted slightly, his gaze fixing on one individual, the most influential Democrat present, and the initial question is directed at you, Senator Schumer. The room fell silent and reporters let their pens slip from their fingers. Schumer's smile wavered as 2.1 million Social Security numbers were issued to nonpartisans during your oversight. Countless accounts marked for silence at your behest, a covert digital blacklist upheld through hidden connections with major tech companies. Would you mind clarifying that, Senator? There was no movement at all, even the C-SPAN operator focused in more closely. This had transformed from a mere hearing into a dramatic shift in power dynamics. Musk was no longer on the defensive, but rather seizing control, and the atmosphere was charged with intensity. A wave of uncertainty swept across the gallery as staff members exchanged glances caught between the realms of policy and history. Schumer adjusted his collar, leaning forward, his fingers curling against the mahogany desk as if preparing to confront an impending wave. He hadn't anticipated it, yet it had already fallen apart. Musk reclined, composed, as if this was merely the beginning. Each camera in the room gradually shifted focus from Musk to Chuck Schumer, whose once bright eyes now reflected the unmistakable expression of a man coming to terms with the fact that the narrative was no longer under his control. The stillness that ensued after Elon Musk's initial strike was not merely uncomfortable, it was profoundly revealing. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the silence stretching on for what felt like an eternity. Even the seasoned press pool, accustomed to the drama of political performances, found it challenging to keep their poise. They weren't observing a debate, they were experiencing a meticulously orchestrated dismantling, with Chuck Schumer at the epicenter. Musk maintained a calm demeanor, refraining from theatrics or grandstanding. He quietly connected the USB to the chamber's display terminal, allowing the data to convey its own message. The initial file contained a scanned email with the header from the office of Senator Charles E. Schumer. The timestamp was clear and undeniable. On October 14, 2020, mere days following the emergence of the Hunter Biden laptop story in the New York Post, and just hours before Twitter, Facebook, and Google initiated measures to restrict its dissemination. We anticipate prompt steps to curtail the circulation of this material. The email stated that this narrative presents a considerable threat to national security, and neglecting to respond could lead to oversight hearings. Signed, Senior Policy Advisor, Office of Senator Schumer. Musk. Allow the stillness to linger. Next appeared the subsequent slide, showcasing a confidential memo exchanged between Schumer's communications team and Meta's internal policy division. The subject line stated clearly, narrative management, COVID, and vaccine disinformation protocol in the document. A concise list of accounts identified by Schumer's office, featuring doctors, journalists, and current members of Congress. They inquire about criminal investigations, reference alternative therapies, and probe into the virus's origins. Elon spoke with a tone that was both detached and precise. This is not a matter of safety. This goes beyond the concept of democracy. This concerns authority and the determination of what information is permissible for the American populace to access. Schumer squirmed in his chair. His fingers hovered near the microphone, yet he remained silent, compelled to confront him head-on. Without hesitation, you didn't merely urge tech companies to eliminate misinformation. You compelled them to suppress uncomfortable realities, not out of a fear of falsehoods, but from a desire to maintain dominance over the story being told. A soft whisper floated across the room. Republican senators shared looks of disbelief, not due to the message itself, but because of the unmistakable clarity. Even a few members of the Democratic Party appeared unsettled. The documents were not mere conjecture. They were not influenced by political bias. They were authentic, time-stamped, verified, and undeniably Schumer. He finally leaned toward the mic. His voice, once so practiced and commanding, now bore a strained tranquility. Mr. Musk, it is the duty of the government to take action against perilous misinformation endangered lives throughout the pandemic. The very foundation of democracy faced jeopardy in the midst of an election. We hurried, Musk interjected. You weren't standing up for democracy. Senator, it was your responsibility to determine who had the authority to define it, and that is not within your purview. He advanced to the next file, a transcript of a Zoom meeting involving Senate Democratic staff and executives from Facebook's content policy team. The phrase that caught my attention was marked in crimson. Our focus is to diminish the prominence of voices that promote narratives inconsistent with public safety communication. This involves scrutinizing the efficacy of vaccines, lockdowns, and mandates irrespective of qualifications. Musk barely acknowledged the crowd. At this moment, his attention was entirely fixed on Schumer. What you refer to as safety is a facade when medical professionals are hushed, when the press is stripped of its voice, and when dissenting political views are stifled. That is far from safety. That's manipulation sanctioned by the state. Schumer attempted to shift direction. We collaborated with various platforms to address what Musk disrupted once more, labeling dissent as perilous and reinterpreting free speech as a menace. There was a lack of coordination. You commanded the cameras, focusing intently on Schumer's expression. The initial spark of confidence he displayed at the start of the hearing had completely faded away. He appeared wan, tense, his jaw clenched, with beads of sweat forming on his brow from the oppressive heat of the room, all while under the watchful gaze of a nation tuned into the narrator's voice. The essence of the American spirit interjected. This was not the action of someone championing democratic values. This represented the design of an official constructing a system of managed reality, not via legislation, not through judicial processes, but through coercive negotiations and intimidation when expression is controlled by authority. The outcome does not equate to safeguarding. It's a form of persuasion. Musk withdrew from the display and positioned himself at the heart of the room. The atmosphere shifted as he moved. Allow me to clarify. I am not here today to represent a party. I am not here to justify the actions of Republicans. I stand firm in the belief that truth is inherently free and cannot be owned by those who offer the most for it. He surveyed the room before locking his eyes back on Schumer. And yet, during your oversight, Senator, truth required approval. A new file emerged on the screen. An internal message from Twitter was displayed on Slack. Confidence and security. I've just received a call from Schumer's office. Once again, another group of election threat actors has been neutralized. Some of these individuals are engaged in journalism. Can we confirm that the message originated in 2022? The journalists in question, representing conservative perspectives, raised concerns about mail-in voting amid political pressures on platforms to stifle dissenting voices. Musk stated that they do not reveal falsehoods. They conceal responsibility. The chamber had ceased to be a stage. The scene unfolded in a courtroom where Chuck Schumer found himself transitioning from the role of prosecutor to that of a defendant. Within just 15 minutes, another commentary emerged. For democracy to endure, dissent is essential, yet dissent cannot thrive if it requires approval from those in power. The irony lies in the fact that in 2008, under the guise of defending democracy, Senator Schumer facilitated the transformation of tech companies into state agents. Schumer looked over at his aides, searching for a glimmer of support. Yet even they had fallen silent. Musk pressed on. Calmer, more deliberate. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, each word you uttered weighed with the gravity of persuasion. You employed institutions to stifle dissent, cloaking it all in a guise of righteousness, yet true righteousness requires no suppression, only deception. Chuck Schumer did not respond. His lips pressed together firmly. His gaze was fixed, not on Musk, but on the surface of the table before him. He kept his gaze fixed downward, avoiding the evidence, the chamber, and especially the figure at the heart of it all, methodically dismantling the structure of his meticulously crafted legacy. The cameras shifted focus once more, yet this time they were not aimed at Musk. They were documenting Schumer ensnared in the midst of the tempest. His gaze turned away, his silence overwhelming, and for the first time in a lengthy career defined by action and influence, Chuck Schumer found himself at a loss for words. He not only steered clear of Musk's gaze. He turned away from the gaze of the nation, the gaze that, after years of slumber, was finally alert and aware. Elon Musk moved forward without waiting for either applause or outrage. He moved with intention, his voice steady and unwavering. It wasn't fervor that propelled him. It was meticulousness. He wasn't attempting to persuade, he was revealing, and the next layer he uncovered was more sinister than the one before. Let's discuss what your office considers to be harmful material. Musk's gaze remained fixed on the man who was now withdrawing into the protective embrace of silence, Senator Chuck Schumer. The display behind Musk shifted once more. This time, the documents carried the imprint of Twitter's internal moderation logs, which later became publicly recognized as part of the now notorious Twitter files. A chorus of whispers swept through the room. All were aware of the impending outcome, yet only a handful were ready for the calculated savagery of the proof presented. Musk presented evidence of a suppression regarding the origins of COVID. An email exchange from early 2021 was displayed on the screen, featuring correspondence between a senior content policy executive at Twitter and an unnamed liaison from Schumer's office. The subject line is an urgent escalation regarding the lab leak theory. Please make sure this narrative is classified as disinformation. The communication stated that numerous public officials have expressed worries regarding its ability to create uncertainty in governmental messaging. Musk remained unfazed. This occurred prior to any agreement and before investigations had reached completion. This was not about halting false information. It was about proactively branding inconvenient truths as falsehoods. A second slide appears, this one featuring redacted Slack logs from Twitter's internal trust and safety team. Schumer's team flagged 5 biologists yesterday. One employee stated that everyone possesses credentials. There are no accounts of conspiracy. What actions shall we take? The response labels their posts as deceptive, diminishes visibility, and maintains consistency. Musk faced the gathering in a true democratic setting. While truth can be unsettling, in Schumer's vision of democracy, it poses a danger. The words lingered in the atmosphere, resonating with a weight of their own significance. Become the antidote, challenged the silence. The screen flickered once more, revealing a chart that displayed over 17,000 accounts marked in shadow ban for expressing skepticism about vaccines within a mere 3-month period. Healthcare professionals, caregivers, guardians, and public representatives. One highlighted post emphasizes that myocarditis risks in young males require greater attention. Let's engage in a candid discussion. Posts labeled as potentially misleading have experienced a decrease in visibility due to shadow banning. Musk raised his eyes once more, directing them not at Schumer but towards the chamber as a whole. How did we arrive at a point where inquiring about medical matters turned into a political transgression, where dialogue faced repercussions and silence was celebrated? He allowed that to resonate. This was not about public health. It was a form of public manipulation. A Democratic senator across the room shifted with discomfort. A staff member cast a wary eye at the live feed display. Observed the suppression of the unadorned. The subsequent file elicited audible gasps. An internal directive from April 2022 has surfaced, outlining a collection of video links identified for removal. Each of these was a direct recording from cell phones belonging to U.S. soldiers stationed in Eastern Europe. In one, a soldier, a figure, identity concealed and features obscured, shared his thoughts openly from a snowy trench in Poland. The reason for our presence remains a mystery. Lacking a strategy, an exit plan, or any clarity, it's all just politics. The video amassed more than 1 million views prior to being flagged. The rationale weakens the effectiveness of strategic communication, harmful to the unity of the military. The announcement followed shortly after Schumer's office expressed worries regarding unverified content related to military dissent. Musk's voice resonated powerfully in the chamber as soldiers raised their inquiries about policy. What is labeled as courage under the Schumer doctrine is deemed misinformation. They failed to obstruct adversaries of the regime. They obstructed the agents of the government. In the bold act of expressing oneself, silence enveloped the space. And then the narration emerged not from Musk, but from an invisible voice guiding the tale. The essence of American morality seeping into the present, reminiscent of ink flowing across paper. Censorship often whispers in the shadows. At times it dons a formal attire, submits a document, and claims it's in the interest of your well-being. Yet hidden behind the facade of societal benefit is a deep-seated fear, a fear of truths that defy political dictates. The First Amendment was crafted not to safeguard soothing falsehoods. It was crafted to safeguard the truth, particularly when it unsettles those in authority. Musk leaned in again, his voice dropping to a hushed, icy tone. You didn't quiet the turmoil, you muted the understanding. You didn't challenge uncertainty, you upheld uniformity. He indicated the final file of the segment, a compilation of terms obscured by algorithms, all incorporated following coordination alongside Schumer's policy team regarding natural immunity and vaccines. Harm, enhancement of abilities, opposition within the armed forces. Hunter Biden's laptop, Musk's words emerged slowly, thoughtfully, akin to carefully considered verdicts. This was not a battle against falsehoods, it was a struggle for responsibility. And Chuck Schumer, whether he acknowledges it or not, played a pivotal role as one of its leaders. He ceased all files, all data, leaving only a profound silence, an echo of stillness. More blame-laden than any phrases. Schumer remained still. He remained silent, offering no objections, for there was nothing more to contest. Not when the proof was not mere speculation or allegation, but rather timestamps and documented policies. And then it unfolded just behind Schumer. A member of his own party gradually descended. His head held high, not in shame, but driven by instinct, for even from his seat, he sensed it approaching. The tide was shifting, and for the first time in ages, history was no longer being penned by those who believed they could dictate the flow of ink. A palpable change had enveloped the hearing room. What started as a formal inquiry had transformed into a televised political inquisition, quite different from what Schumer anticipated leading. He had called upon Elon Musk, expecting a public reprimand of a wayward tech mogul. Instead, he had welcomed a precision-driven reformer into the sanctuary of deceit. And now Musk was delving further. He averted his gaze from the evidence screen and cast another glance at the man who wore a smirk, or what was left of it. Chuck Schumer's smile had vanished. His jaw clenched, fingers woven together. His eyes sparked with increasing animosity. Musk remained undeterred, inhaling deeply and steadily. We've discussed censorship, he started, but now let's shift our focus to currency. The atmosphere shifted, journalists became alert, and even a few of Schumer's aides, who had been intensely jotting down notes or scrolling through their devices, took notice. With a momentary pause, Musk reached into his jacket and retrieved a second USB. This one, he remarked, isn't about suppression. It's about compensation. The screen illuminated with a straightforward timeline, showcasing dates, contributions, and beneficiaries. Let us begin with October 2020. Musk recounted the same week Twitter prevented the New York Post from publishing a story on Hunter Biden. Your re-election campaign, devoid of any explanation or appeal, amassed over $1.2 million from executives at Alphabet and Pfizer. A mere coincidence, perhaps. He tilted his head ever so slightly, seeking a reply, but Schumer remained silent. A week later, your office demanded greater accountability from the platform, and predictably, there was an uptick in suppression, an increase in fact-checking, and a rise in policy violations. The following slide presented a chart. The situation was straightforward, marked by a clear upward trend in censorship events triggered by donations to Schumer's campaign from major tech and pharmaceutical PACs. The lines aligned seamlessly. Musk's voice was incisive, yet he never drew his weapon. It wasn't about volume, but rather the clarity that we recognize in Silicon Valley. Cause and effect, but in Washington it's referred to as fundraising. Gentle chuckles floated from various nooks of the gallery. The gentle souls remain silent until someone else shatters the silence first. Suppresses dissent regarding its offering. Facebook conceals posts about vaccine hesitancy, leading to an increase in your campaign funds. He hesitated for a moment before unleashing the line with the force of a hammer. In a world where silence reigns, Wealth circulates, yet it seldom reaches the hands of the many. It seeps into your pocket, Senator Gass. Schumer leaned forward, his face flushed, not from shame but from fury. This is utterly unacceptable, he exclaimed. You are promoting unfounded theories. This is what paranoia looks like. Techno-libertarianism from an individual who acquired a social media platform and seeks to assume a savior role. Yet Musk remained unfazed, showing no sign of hesitation, merely arching an eyebrow. Label it however you wish, he replied with a steady demeanor. But I have proof, while you're merely displaying anger. The atmosphere stiffened once more, and then the remarks pierced through, cutting into the very essence of Schumer's outrage. When a politician lacks factual support, he resorts to raising his voice. When he is unable to counter the evidence, he resorts to personal attacks. It's not a counterargument, it's a way out. It is necessary to proceed to the next slide. A record of transactions from FEC, dated June 2021. In light of your efforts to broaden the scope of digital misinformation legislation, a significant influx of contributions has come your way. $250,000 from a PAS associated with Madna for $100,000 from a coalition of major tech companies, and $175,000 from a pharmaceutical lobbying firm that engaged in direct discussions with your team. He faced the committee once more. This wasn't about raising funds. It was about billing a Democratic senator. 3 seats down from Schumer, a figure rubbed his temple, clearly showing signs of distress. Musk was right on target. This town thrives on connectivity. When the price of that access is the truth, the invoice invariably lands in the hands of the public. Then arrived the most incriminating document to date, an internal memo from a lobbying firm labeled Narrative Maintenance Priority List for Q3. Coordinate with Senate Majority leadership on key action items to sustain and promote support for donations. Align timing with specific public statements regarding platform regulation to limit the exposure of dissenting scientific voices through policy pressure. A handwritten note was verified with Schumer's team prior to the final draft. The note lacked a signature. It was unnecessary. The communication was unmistakable. Musk approached the microphone with intent. You were not the subject of any lobbying efforts. You have been selected for the position. Schumer was clearly seething at this point. His voice elevated once more. Do you really believe you can just stroll in here and level accusations of corruption against a sitting senator using spreadsheets and selective data? This is a modern iteration of McCarthyism, albeit in a more subdued form. For the first time, I refrained from placing blame on you. I showcased timelines, transactions, and patterns. The claim is based on logic, not feelings. The room appeared to transform once more, leaning not into disorder, but into agreement. The truth was now exposed, and no level of indignation could obscure the message. Musk stated that if a conspiracy exists, it certainly isn't found in my documents. Your silence speaks volumes. Each instance the media shied away from the crucial inquiries, each occasion a contribution arrived with strings attached, each moment when suppression served your political ambitions, and then the concluding remark, gentle yet intentional, the impact of power does not exist in isolation. It festers in the darkness. Chuck Schumer has dedicated the past 10 years to mastering the craft of maneuvering in shadows while projecting a facade of clarity. The cameras seemed lost, unsure of where to direct their gaze. Some concentrated on Musk, the composed data, while others remained fixated on Schumer, the senator with a flushed face coming undone. Yet, one camera captured something even more intriguing just behind Schumer. Another Democratic senator gradually reclined in his chair, lowering his head in contemplation. It was tiny, it was understated, yet it conveyed a deeper meaning. He was aware that all eyes in the room were upon him, fully aware of the truth. The issue wasn't Elon Musk. The issue lay within the system, and Chuck Schumer had emerged as its most refined advocate. When Elon Musk stood to deliver his closing remarks, the hearing room had transformed into something far removed from a forum for discussion. It transformed into a quiet testament, a space of evaluation, not solely concerning an individual but an entire system. And Musk, cold and poised, stood not merely as a tech executive, but as the voice of a rebellion, one not of chaos, but of clarity. He kept his voice steady. He didn't require honesty when brandished without trepidation. Doesn't raise his voice at fragments. He fixed his gaze forward, not at the committee, but at the audience spanning the nation. The veterans whose voices have been muted, the doctors labeled as threats, the citizens sidelined for seeking answers. You failed to safeguard the individuals from false information. He started with a measured and thoughtful approach. You shielded them from reality. The words resonated with an air of finality. You warned them that disagreement could be fatal. You informed them that inquiries posed a danger. You wielded fear as a weapon, not for their caution, but for your dominion. His voice stayed soft, yet it now held a profound resonance. The burden of a man who has glimpsed the truth and decided to set it ablaze. You employ the rhetoric of democracy to construct a framework of compliance. You referred to it as security. You referred to it as advancement, yet it was merely domination cloaked in righteousness. Silence reigned with not a single soul shifting on the Democratic side, no arguments put forth, no refutations offered. The silence ascended, thick and suffocating, an undeniable presence. A solitary frame from C-SPAN captured the whole line of Democratic senators, their heads lowered or staring ahead in a state of blank denial. No one stepped up to the mic, and not a single one matched my stature. In that instant, it was evident they had stopped battling the truth. They were concealing themselves from them. The narrator's voice came back, cutting and precise, laced with a sense of harsh reality. In every empire's journey, there exists a pivotal moment, not the moment of its downfall, but the instant of revelation when the facade shatters and those who once held power come to understand that they evoke not fear, but rather pity, and must press on regardless. You claimed it was in the best interest of the people. You warned tech platforms that criticism posed a threat. You instructed the soldiers to be quiet. You instructed scientists to vanish. You conveyed to the audience that inquiring was a mark of extremism and that non-compliance rendered them adversaries. Then arrived the phrase that pierced the very soul of the room. Let me explain what extremism truly is. Extremism represents a regime that dreads the truth far more than it does falsehoods. And that is the government you have constructed. Senator Schumer, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't stress. It was a revelation. The enchantment was unraveling. Schumer gazed vacantly, the passion in his tone snuffed out. His allies stood in silence, paralyzed by fear that even a whisper might anchor them to the doomed vessel. Musk emphasized his statements, evolving them into a broader conclusion, not targeting a specific party, but critiquing an entire ideology. You did not overcome disinformation. You transformed it, reshaping inconvenient truths into compelling narratives. You programmed a system with political biases and labeled it security. Trust was not established. You constructed a mechanism, an extensive network of control, one that doesn't don a uniform or wield a weapon, yet silences with a grin and claims it's for your safety. He came to a halt. Allow the stillness to linger. Allow it to unfold naturally. Allow it to achieve what the media never permitted it to accomplish. Let it convey its own message. However, reality does not require your approval to be. And it certainly doesn't require your safeguarding. The commentary returned, resonating like thunder rumbling through the heavens. There are instances when the course of history shifts, not through violence, but through insight. When the words finally escape the lips of a man courageous enough to utter them, and those who feigned ignorance find themselves with nowhere else to turn. At times, the truth doesn't require victory, it merely needs to be articulated with sufficient volume for those who dread it to react in their usual manner. One by one, they cast their gazes downward, just as they did behind Chuck Schumer. The facade started to crumble. A senator discreetly shut her binder. Another took off his glasses, gently massaging his forehead in slow, deliberate circles. A third reclined, gaze far away. A man who has ceased his struggle, now mourning the revelation of a deception he once upheld. You filtered, you gathered, and you unified. M's final words were not a question, they stood as a definitive statement. And now the audience is aware that he has distanced himself from the microphone. Silence reigned, devoid of applause or utterance. In that instant, all barriers had vanished. The atmosphere felt dense at this moment. Not with anger, not with discussion, but with discernment. There was a notable absence of shouting. No one was standing up for themselves. The sole sound lingering in the room was a soft, persistent hum, a reminder that something irrevocable had just taken place. Elon Musk loomed large at the heart of the chamber. A lone presence, serene and unyielding, the final voice of honesty in a space designed to stifle it. He shifted his gaze, not towards Chuck Schumer, nor to the senators who chose silence, nor to the media that had labeled him a threat for years, but to the camera addressing the American people, the ones who had been deceived, manipulated, marked, prohibited, and categorized merely for seeking the answers their authorities were too intimidated to provide. "We cannot protect liberty," Musk began, his voice steady and eyes unwavering, "by relinquishing it to those who exploit it." The phrases were straightforward, yet they resonated with the force of a storm. Democracy cannot thrive when dissent is stifled. Public health cannot be safeguarded through the suppression of honesty. Trust is not built by manipulating emotions with a formula rooted in fear. The atmosphere in the room was completely tranquil now. Even the camera crew remained still, sensing that this was not a moment meant for capture. It was a sight to behold. Musk hesitated for a moment, then struck with precision, not out of rage, but with unmistakable clarity. If the truth poses a danger to a politician, perhaps that politician is unfit to wield authority. All eyes were drawn inescapably. In that stillness, the concluding remark resonated like a judge's gavel. Elon Musk did not topple Chuck Schumer as he wielded greater influence. He didn't even have to try harder to convince anyone. He merely had to articulate what Schumer could no longer conceal in the end. The empire of suppression wasn't brought down by a mere speech. It was a reflection. Chuck Schumer, confronted by the mirror of his own creation, found himself at a loss for words. The space, previously alive with the drama of politics, now resonated with a sense of subdued reflection. Without the fanfare or media coverage, it's time to retreat and embrace the unfiltered reality. With a quiet determination, he closed the folder of evidence he had never raised his voice to present. He nodded once, not in triumph, but in resolution, and turned away from the podium. Not directed at the thrones of authority, but aimed at the essence of the people's reality. And then the cameras captured one last incriminating frame. It focused not on Musk, but on Chuck Schumer. Slumped in his seat, head bowed, not in contemplation, but in defeat. A man who constructed a bastion of quietude only to be entombed under its debris when the reality ultimately seized its stage. And then the world witnessed it. A solitary word started to gain traction. First 100, then thousands, and ultimately the worldwide deluge. Schumer reveals.